I just want to congratulate the gentleman who's introducing our speaker because he's a freshman. Let's hear it for first years. And I want to make sure that you use the microphone because that just makes you feel more comfortable.
All right, thank you, Vicky. Hey everyone, my name is Oskar. I'm an ex-freshman from Kazakhstan, and today I'm very lucky to introduce Razmik Havagimian, who has such a vast entrepreneurial experience that I gotta read it off my phone in order not to mess up anything. So right now, he's the founder of Playtime, which is a company that partners with the GOAT himself, Leo Messi. He is also a co-founder of Matchday, and previously, or as Razmik himself puts it, prior lives, he was founder of Pixel Labs, or Hoodline, that was acquired by Nextdoor. He was co-founder of Wiki.com, that was also acquired by Rakuten, where he was later an executive chairman. He also launched an incubator for the developing world and worked as a general partner of Graph Ventures and limited partner in Sequoia. Besides all of that, Razmik also has other experiences, which includes working on initiatives with the United Nations. Razmik is a UC Berkeley alumni, and he completed his MBA degree in Stanford. And besides being a transformative power in entrepreneurship, technology, and entertainment, Razmik is also a great inspiration, an example of someone who is outside the US but made it big here. And that is particularly the reason why I signed up to introduce him. And without further ado, I'll pass it over to Razmik. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Should I speak into this? This one?
Yeah, he already has a microphone.
I'm mic'd. Okay, great. It's great to be back. Hi, everyone. So this slide looks busy, so I thought maybe I'll break it down into 4 chapters. 4 of many, I hope, kind of getting started. And 4 kind of a little bit distinct. There's a common theme between all of them, but I think they're all a little bit different. And since I was a kid, I never liked the question, what do you want to be when you grow up, or what do you want to do when you grow up? I want to do many things, or like, what's your dream? I have a lot of dreams, so it can be many things. And maybe you'll see some of that through the slides. But class of 99, I was at PIS and Haas. Haas minor, I don't know if that still exists, and I think there are some Haas students here. Seems like you guys are from all over campus. And yes, I did go to Stanford, but all the big games, I'm on the blue side. You gotta support the public schools. That's where my formative years were. So let me just start with sort of 15 years ago. That's sort of chapter 1 for me when I really started building things. But chapter 0 is I'm an Armenian kid from Egypt. I came at 16 and basically stayed. Came to Berkeley for undergrad. Between undergrad and grad, I was in Japan for about 4 years, working on the very early mobile phones. Before there was an iPhone, there were iMode phones with Docomo. So I caught the technology bug there and went to grad school just really to try and take as many different classes as I can. So the first one, Embrace, came out of a class between mechanical engineering, the medical school, and the business school. And let me tell you a little bit about it. So for each of the chapters, I'll try to give you the sort of the origin story and maybe a little bit about the why I did that. And then we can tease those out and maybe go a little bit deeper during the Q&A. So Embrace is a $25 premature infant incubator, a warmer. We started with a class project called Entrepreneurial Design for Extreme Affordability. And the challenge for us by the professors, and David Kelly from IDEO was one of our teachers there, said 20 million babies are born every year that are low birth weight. 4 million of them will die, and roughly about 1 million of the 4 die from hypothermia. So if they're no more than 8 weeks premature, regulating their heat is the one thing that those infants need. So we did a lot of different things, but what ultimately we decided to do is build a baby sleeping bag. And we patented something with some technology from MIT as well called phase change material. You put it in a pouch, just like wax. If you heat it in boiling water, it can't get any hotter than 37 degrees. So you put that in a sleeping bag, put the infant on it, and even in a village where there is no electricity, you're able to have an infant incubator. So that's Embrace. Now, the origin of it was how do we go about solving something this complex, and who are we solving it for? And it really boils down, if you think about design thinking, and this is the IDEO methodology, and this was a beautiful way to simplifying it for us as students then, was who's the user and what is their need, and how do you take that at scale eventually? And the user for us at the end of the day, we spent time in Nepal and India as students, and we realized it's actually the parents. It's the moms mainly. It wasn't the infants. And starting to think about it that way, we wanted to know, well, what is the real need that we're solving for? And became pretty clear that the need is they just want a surviving chance for their kids, literally. So we knew who the user is, that we need to give them a chance, even if it's not 100% of the time. And we simplified it that way. So for us, we came up with what we're solving for. And we tried everything. We put a baby in a sleeping bag. We tried hot water bottles. We tried light bulbs. Literally, it was rapid prototyping. Every 2 days, we're coming up with an idea until we landed on the sleeping bag. That's the first drawing. Actually, that's mine on a sheet. We figured that we can keep the front of it open because you can warm the baby. Like even if it's a male or a female as a parent, you can, or even relatives or others, you can just warm the baby by opening the front. We tried everything until we landed on this, and then we came to a decision. We're like, okay, we're just graduating. We have a ton of loans. I came here as a foreign exchange student, and same with Stanford. So I had a ton of loans, and I was like, am I going to do a nonprofit? But I wanted to. Like at that point, my mind was set that in my life, I want to do things that are important and big, and I wanted to do it in that order. Then I realized by chapter 4 that, wow, what if you can do both? What if you can do things that are important and big at the same time? But I'll get to that. So that's a little bit about Embrace. So we went from those design, that's our daughter. We just bundled her up. Had we let her legs out, she would have been hanging out of it. So this was a very small model. Then we started prototyping and testing in Kenya. And now it's in 22 different countries where we just sent some to Ukraine. Some are going to the southern part of Armenia. Probably saved about 450,000 children to date, and it's going. Okay, so hopefully that was 5 minutes. So Vicky has the hardest thing I've done. This was a class project at Stanford, an entrepreneurship class, and we wanted to come up with a new venture and have our professor, who happened to be a venture capitalist at Greylock, cut the first check. And the idea was to build a language learning tool. And when I was a kid with my dad on Saturdays in Egypt, we would watch Bollywood films, and there were no subtitles. I can still sing, actually, to Omar Akbar Anthony. I couldn't even translate the stuff or understand it, but the idea there was like, well, imagine if you're actually understanding what this content is saying, what kind of a culture bridge you can start drawing. So we built Vicky as a language learning tool where it can have two languages at the same time. But we had professors talking. It didn't work. It didn't go anywhere. Then my co-founder had the idea of putting Boys Over Flowers, a Korean drama, behind it, and this thing exploded. It literally exploded. So we're like, okay, people can learn a new language at the same time. They can get entertained, and they can understand, a local content that's going very global. So that was the idea behind Vicky. This is a Japanese show that actually went pretty much everywhere in the world, except I think Sudan, if I remember this correctly. Yes, and Sudan is split in two countries now, South and North, and Mauritania, there in Africa. But the interesting part of it is when you take a show and you put subtitles on it, especially if it's fan subtitles, there's so much passion that goes into getting it right. We built a tool where you can edit each other's work. So we would have thousands of people editing the same work, and within 24 hours, we were beating the pirates to it. So all of a sudden, it's in all these different languages. So this Japanese show initially got translated into Lithuanian, and then went to Tagalog and English. And then this is a bit of an eyesore, but an interesting one. Wired did a piece on it. Let me explain what's going on here. So these are TV series on Vicky that were from all over the world, from China, Russia, Venezuela. And then you see the views in the second column. So Boys Over Flowers, the first one we had, got about 35 million views, which is actually really high compared to even US cable shows, translated in 57 languages. then it shows you what's the first language it got translated to, and then from there, how it spread to other languages. So it wasn't from original language to English. Oftentimes, it was original language to Arabic. When we looked at our Korean dramas, in the US, 40% of viewers in the first year were African American. So this is mind-boggling to me, how things can start traveling once you start looking at data. But that was Viki, and it was the hardest thing I'd done because we had to convince the studios to give us the content, that fans can create quality subtitles, that if you open the content up for the rest of the world, piracy actually would go down. And then once we got to a point where revenue started growing, and Viki now maybe is at 150 million in revenues by, I think by year 3, we realized, wow, if we look at the languages on Viki, out of 200 languages we're translating, 50 of them were endangered languages. So you can also do good. But we had to get on our feet first to be able to say, okay, how do we help some of these languages? There were languages like Klingon, which is not endangered, but fan subtitles for dramas were in every language. But it was exciting to see that once you build something, it can take a life of its own. So we're lucky and blessed. We exited to Rakuten. That was the first exit I've had. I think that's my first and last time in a suit. Typically, I'm the bearded guy on the Rakuten board and the only bearded guy, but they shaved me, put me in a suit, and I became a corporate guy. But wanted to tell you a little bit about the exit journey, because Viki, you were saying that maybe this is relevant to the class. Yes. There's so many Vikis here. And sort of what I learned from that. So the exit itself was actually a very difficult decision. We were in Singapore at the time, and the company was growing. And in my mind, you only exit if it's not working, or if someone can give you a quantum leap in what you're building. We had a term sheet for about 120 million at the time, and it took 6 months for them to close it. And then what happened is, like, they had co-CEOs, and we had a month of burn. I always was running out of money. I was always pushing it to the limit. The term sheet dropped, so I moved back to the US. We had a second child at the time. Spoke with some of the VCs here. They said, okay, well, if you guys are based here, not in Singapore, the opportunities open up. So one of our investors, Reid Hoffman at Greylock of LinkedIn and Microsoft fame, introduced me to Mikitani-san, the chairman and founder of Rakuten. I went to his house for a barbecue, and we went to a dinner at his house a couple of days after, and we started talking about Viki. And he said, well, we want to do something with you guys. Would you consider an exit? And obviously, I was thinking yes, but I had to say no. And I said, there's the easy way and there's the hard way. I said, the hard way is we have term sheets. You guys can come in with others, but easy way is I threw this out there. I said, if there's a 2 in front of it. So a few days later, we had a term sheet, literally. So having sort of the psyche to not be the one that's saying you're selling, and you have your investors that are the ones that are actually whispering in their ears and talking about the strategy and the fit made a big difference. So for me, I needed to know, even though my back was against the wall, that we have something valuable here, and be able to stand on my feet and say, no, we're not interested in selling. So what I learned, I put some thoughts together, and some of these are slides over time I put in here to share, but it's a rare window. Exits are not easy, right? Most startups will not have an exit, and when that happens, I think it's a good opportunity to kind of look back and correct mistakes you've done. In my case, there were hires that, team members that came maybe 6 months right before the exit, but I know how much value they'd added, and they didn't have enough equity. I took equity from our pool as part of the exit and made sure that they get their fair share. I gave some of my retention package away actually to some execs so they can stay longer. And it was important for me to negotiate 2 years out. When you have an exit, you typically take the deal you have, but it was really important for me to say, listen, we have a game plan, but we don't have the capital to execute. It's important that we add an additional 50 million on top of the exit value, because I don't want to ask for budget every time. And that's exactly what we did. We took that 50 million, executed against our plan, and Viki started taking off. negotiate 2 years out, don't rush culture. There were posters everywhere with Rakuten, and we would take it in, but at the same time, it was important that we keep the company name. It became called Rakuten Viki 6-7 years after. But for us, it was our baby. And for me, culture is not things you write on walls. It really takes history. You cultivate it with your team. It takes time. So that shared time is important. Don't sweat the small asks. Just make the company that bought you guys look like heroes. At the same time, I always felt like I need to keep earning it. It was easy. It was a good exit. Again, I feel lucky and blessed. It was easy to say it's in Rakuten, it's their responsibility. But having pride in it, I think, pays forward and sets the right culture. You can read the rest. So make them look good and give more than take. For me, that was very important, and I still live by it. All right, Hoodline. I'm going to go faster so we can get to the Q&A. So Hoodline was important and big. We were talking about Sudan, and the only reason I know there are 2 Sudans is because I spent time there with the United Nations, and the north where Darfur is, and the south with Juba. I used to, between first and second year of Stanford, I had opportunities to do private equity or management consulting, but my wife and I decided to go to Sudan, live in a tent. She was writing, and I was working on with UNDP on pro-poor investment initiatives. But there's mind-boggling stuff happening there, seeing 7-year-olds with guns, seeing sort of oil rigs being built by prisoners from other countries. None of this stuff was covered. So I was wondering why this news is not making it. What can I do at a news level? Then we started looking at US news, and newspapers were dying everywhere. And I wanted to, now it's called generative AI. 5 years ago, we decided to build machine learning models to take data sets from 200 different sources, from Twitter to, I had the entire Yelp fire hose. And we started actually comparing data from, let's say, today versus yesterday, and you see the delta, a business that opened, a business that closed. And we started writing articles to a point where we were actually getting 1 billion views through our APIs on the content that we were writing. So it was local news powered by data and ML models. And the idea was to build a nearby button of the internet. I just wanted an app where you just open up. If something happened right around you, it's called Nearby. And we bought the URL Nearby. You open up, click on it, you see what's happening around you at a latitude and longitude level, literally within, let's say, 10 feet of where you are. It was very hard. Local is extremely challenging. That's why pretty much every company that's tried it has gone under or spent hundreds of millions, because the unit economics of local don't work. If you want to have reporters everywhere, it's going to cost you about $30, $40 per story. But the advertising revenues from local news, it's not the same as Kim Kardashian having a baby. You're going to be able to make $3 or $4 on it. So getting those unit economics, the only way we could do it was through the machine learning and AI models that we had. So we realized also at that point that local is very dominant. Let's go find a partner that has the distribution but doesn't have the content. And that's where the idea of turning the company, instead of a consumer destination, nearby.com itself or the app, but power the content creation. And we partnered up with Nextdoor. It was a 6-month partnership where eventually it ended up being an exit in 2019, about a year and a half before their IPO, which went up to $14, and we're back down to, I think, $1.75. The market is just insane. Chapter 4, playtime. So let me just go back a little bit about how this whole thing came about. After the Viki exit to Rakuten, I moved to Rakuten's board, and I was an observer on the board. This was around the time where Rakuten became the sponsors of FC Barcelona. Same with the Warriors. If you guys have seen it, you see a circle R on the jersey. I was running all the video at that point. There was a company in Barcelona called Waki TV that was part of the portfolio, and I was a massive football fan, just like literally growing up. Again, as an Armenian kid, I'd make friends with the kids in Cairo by taking socks and putting strings around it, playing between the cars. So when we became the FC Barcelona sponsors, I was like, this is incredible. So one of their board members, Didac Lee, who I knew from Viki days, introduced us to the Messis, and Leo took my two kids on the pitch on the match, so they met him before I did. I would have fainted if I was a kid. I started with Panini stickers and Maradona days. But after that, it just became a working relationship, which I'll get into. But that is Playtime. That's my first album, dating myself. I think maybe I was 7 or 8. This was Maradona's heydays. You guys familiar with Panini? Has anyone come across the sticker albums? Okay, some. Just this half of the room. Interesting. These are basically the World Cup albums that come up every 4 years or so on the men's side. Now they're doing the women's as well, which is great. So I fell in love with it because you get to basically learn about the world. And the Egyptian team would never make World Cups. They made it once when I was a kid. They made it again actually in Russia, where I went to watch it, and they got smashed. And Armenia never makes it as ethnically Armenian, even though we have some decent players. But this was Leo with my son when we met at the training after the match. And what had ended up happening over time is the video is not going to play. Okay, so I'll stay on a blank page because it's good. This is sort of like your future. It is a blank page. So the whole Argentina national team was training in Miami. This was around September of last year. So I was in Miami as well. Kind of gives you a hint why Leo's in Miami today. And when we were sitting down and thinking about sort of Leo and what he cares about, it became pretty clear that on the impact side, he cares about the environment and broad-based inclusion, from gender equality to education to healthcare. And on the business side, there really hasn't been Leo the entrepreneur. So this was his chapter to start thinking about sort of the business side of things. And him, his dad, his brother, they asked, how did Michael Jordan start thinking about investing while he was playing basketball? And I argue that Leo is sort of the other goat, if you will, 30 years after. So I started introducing him to technology companies, from companies like Sorare to AC Momento to Socios and others. And over time, we built that relationship where when we were in Miami, we're like, okay, well, why don't we launch this? So we launched Playtime as a holding company. And we're going to look at everything at the intersection of sports and technology. So this could be from the investment side to team ownership to anything that's ancillary and touches sport. But we haven't launched, so there are some things I cannot talk about because of SEC regulations and blackout period. But this is sort of the next chapter. It brings sort of my love for the game, ability to touch 5 billion people, literally, and with someone that's, yes, is the GOAT, but is super humble. So I'll stop there, and you guys can ask anything. Literally anything goes. The video was the World Cup, which almost killed me. This last World Cup was craziness for me, and it was from the Holland match, which was the most tense, Argentina versus Holland. And if there are Dutch fans here, hats off to you.
I'm sure they're. Wait, hold on. Who are the Holland fans here? The Dutch fans, I should say.
This one.
Come on.
It's a crazy game.
Orange? I mean, who isn't a fan of orange? Is it orange?
They're orange, yes. And they're incredible. They came back with the last 5 minutes with 2 goals.
Just out of curiosity, I can say that I am not necessarily a soccer fan, but I'm definitely a World Cup fan. Has anybody seen a World Cup? I just had a show of hands. World Cup games?
Live?
At least the half of you? Very disappointed, yeah. Well, I have been busily writing all sorts of notes, but I thought I'd start as you all get warmed up. By the way, still cold in this room. Can't get it changed, but there's a way for you all to get warmer. Anybody know how? Raise your hands. So ask questions. I have some questions that I want to ask Rosmik, but please interject. Amy is walking on a bad leg, so if you can help her by passing around the microphone, that would be helpful. Fantastic. So I am kind of curious. I love how, so we've been talking about different businesses. We talked about the beginning of the semester, about starting businesses, how you get that idea. we've heard a number of individuals who are in the process or have started businesses and have sold. But we have not heard from anybody who's basically started such a wide variety of businesses. It's almost incredible. And I have a more personal question for you. Razmik, you're not tall like Michael Jordan. You're not like a big imposing guy. I'm just curious, like, what do you think is your secret for getting people, you talked about trust, but getting people to trust and interact with you in all these different areas?
So I'm about 6'2". You can see Messi is 6'4" in the photo next to me. No, I'm kidding. You can see it next to Leo, so you get a sense for it. I don't know, you earn it, right? I didn't set out to be an entrepreneur. I mean, I was my first startup, I think, because I came alone, and I was supposed to go back and be a jeweler like my dad and grandfather, an Armenian artisan. I didn't want to. I just wanted to see what I can do on my own. And I think you build that confidence, and when you build that and try things, there's so many things I learned from and I didn't do well. You start, I think, just gravitating around people that are like you, that challenge you, that also want to build. So I think probably in every venture, there are 2 or 3 people that I would for sure build with again at the early stage. And as the companies grow, you have different team members for different roles. But I made a ton of mistakes too, especially at Viki, my first venture at scale, because at some point I was, after the exit, managing 600 people, and I realized my blind spots. But in the early days, it started in Singapore at a place called Hackerspace, which was a converted massage parlor, literally with a bunch of engineers there on Arab Street in Singapore. And I just basically, any engineer I could find, I would pitch the idea of Viki. And our first 4 engineers we hired from there. So it was.
How did you pitch it? It's fairly complicated, I think, but how did you pitch it?
I think the personal story for me was something that drove me. Like, it's really important to know why you're doing it. And we really did pitch and believe and live to the expectation of building cultural bridges. And that was really important. And when we were building it, I wanted to build something challenging, and I think engineers like the challenge. And at the same time, we realized that it's market making. You can't point to another product and say fans are creating, something like subtitles. It's not a product that exists, and you're opening up the world. You're putting Arabic subtitles on a Korean drama and opening up the Middle East. Like, there wasn't one. And I think that challenge, like focusing on the challenge, was one way of growing it. And Embrace was the same. Incubators are $20,000. Our challenge was to do it at 1% of the cost. We did it at $25, right? Not $200. So I think always there was that level of challenge around it that gravitated really good talent. Like the harder path. I think sometimes it's good to take that harder path.
I think that you also,
Thank you, have this ability to articulate a certain way, because you could say that Viki does this incredible translation, but what you just said was you build cultural bridges. There's a pretty big difference between those two. And
because we understand each other. Once you understand what we're talking about, we realize we're more alike than different.
I interrupted you when you said you were going to tell your story, anybody who would listen in Singapore. Keep on talking about that.
I was saying that's where I first met the team, right? About how I found the team. It so happened that we were there, but my co-founders just were phenomenal. They Jiwon Moon was studying at Harvard. She was studying education technology. Her husband was my classmate at Stanford. We're a year apart. So building the education tool was actually Jiwon's idea. Turning it into a media company is the direction we ended up going, but it took a team. She ran the community, I was the CEO, and Chang Song run the technology. They moved to Singapore as well, and we just built it out of there.
How did you decide who did what?
We honestly it just became natural, like where our superpowers were. I knew I wasn't technical, and Chang Song was just phenomenal at it. Yeah. Jiwon was building the community, so I took everything else. And by default, I became the CEO.
People are always eager. By the way, I've been getting a lot of feedback that you're hoping that the conversations would go a certain way. You all have the power, so please ask. But people are always dying to know what you did wrong. Not you in particular, but anybody. Anything that you can talk about that you, just as to exemplify that things can go wrong, you can do wrong things, but it's still okay.
Yeah, probably embrace. I think the biggest challenge there was like we knew every day we wait there are more infants that will die. We called it a infant incubator, and we shouldn't have, because as soon as we called it an incubator, it became a medical device. And when it becomes a medical device, the levels of approval that you have to go through in every country and in hospitals and with NGOs, it took us 4 years to launch the product. We came out swinging. We're just A-type MBAs, we're gonna go save lives, we're not gonna take the private equity jobs. Having that patience to be able to wait 4 years, maybe we would have shaved 2 years off if we just called it a warmer or looked for another way to market rather than saying, we're building a $25 incubator.
Rosmik, I think it was on 60 Minutes.
Might have been, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's really no better way to get a little exposure than be on CBS, or there used to be.
It was great. Jane Chen, who was also here behind me at the GSB, Rahul Panikkar, and Linus. Linus was the one who was in the photos. It was an incredible team. I was at NBC launching Vicky at the same time. They moved to India and built it out from the ground. But it always takes an incredible team like that. And Jane is still working on Embrace.
She's still working on
Yeah.
Embrace. And there's a question up there.
Could you hear me?
Yeah.
So my question was that you mentioned that there are people you'd work with again from the people you worked with in the past. And so what do you look for in like ideal co-founders and team members? And what do you recommend we do to become those kind of ideal members?
Can you repeat the second part?
So
What I look for, and then what was the second part?
So what do you recommend like we as students can do to become those ideal founders?
I don't know if there's a personality type or an ideal founder. I mean, you don't want it to be a job, right? Like, it's never a job. Jobs are very transactional. So if it turns into a job, people at some point, I think, are going to leave. So you're not looking for people that are looking at it as a job, and you don't want it to be, completely your life either. But you want people that will obsess over it in a way like they really want to solve like a problem, not just because of an exit or the capital. All that stuff is byproduct. So I think looking for folks that are looking at it that way, sort of not job way, is important. And you want people that there will be hard times. Startups are so hard that the highs and lows are really severe, but they're also like, if you put it on a timeline, they're also condensed. Like 6 months before our Vicky exit, I had a list of 40 people I had to let go, and these were people that, one by one I had brought onto the team. So you feel responsible for them, but 6 months after, we had an incredible exit. It was sort of the biggest in Southeast Asia at the time. So people that want, like that will go into the battle with you. And I remember after the Vicky exit, we were talking about this. Like I explained it, and that was the time Kung Fu Panda had come out. I was like, it's like that moment when Kung Fu Panda is going into battle, and he looks left, he looks right, he sees this other character is going into battle with him, and he turns around and says, "I love you guys." Like, you want that. You want to look left and right and see that people are there with you.
Is there anything?
I don't know if that's helpful, but yeah, don't.
Yeah, super helpful. Thank you.
Is there anything that people did, like something specific that somebody did that you were like, yeah, they made a hard decision and it was supportive of what we're doing?
Yeah, so oftentimes it's little decisions that you just don't see how impactful they were or what ripples they created. It's a hard one to answer. I've seen it. I've seen it at a product level. I've seen it from our CFO at Vicky with Embrace, the decision for the team to say, okay, we're going to move to India, because that was the only way to get it off the ground. They just left everything and moved to India.
Why was
they
India?
Set up. Because 1 million out of the 4 million infants impacted a year are in India. Actually 1.2, and Nepal was nearby, and we figured that'd be sort of a good launch point. So that one decision to actually move there.
So other than singing Bollywood songs, I mean, who on the team had some background in India?
Rahul Panikkar was in electrical engineering, is from India, and he had some contacts, but also some of our advisors at Stanford Hospital were doctors from India, and a neonatal unit connected us with the right NGOs, and we use that as a hub.
And how long were you there before things started?
I went in and out. I didn't move
Okay.
there. I was in Singapore at the time, but probably 4 years in earnest to really get it off the ground.
It's a long time.
It's a long time, especially for students just graduating. The patience level is different.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you said something that kind of surprised me. You said when you have a startup, and you have a good exit, you usually take it. And this was like an interesting statement that you brought up, and I was wondering, when you create a startup, you're usually really attached to the idea that you started the startup with. Like, you put in so much time and effort, you invested so much of your life, and brought on all these other people who were just as passionate about the mission as you were. Why do you take the exit? What are the factors that make you choose the exit? And kind of should we found startups around ideas that we're less attached with so that we can leave them or can take the
I
big
think you
exit
should
when
always
it
be
presents
attached.
itself?
Again, it goes back to not being not being a job, but the alternative to an exit is just very hard. I mean, the path of a startup is an incredibly difficult one. But I was also saying, if you find a path that you can continue growing it without needing sort of a parent company or the funding, for us with Viki, it was hard because we were in Singapore and there are no Series Bs there. You can raise a Series A, but that's it because the market isn't large enough. Even Southeast Asia wasn't large enough. So it was the best alternative. And it's always good to have option value. For me, fundraising and exit is always the time where I think about which direction I want to go. And if there is an exit opportunity and it's the right home, I think it's worth considering. But always be attached because it's hard. If you're not doing it for the right reasons and you're not attached, why do it? It gets so hard. So when you know why you are doing it and you're attached to something, I think when things get really hard, you're going to remember why you're going to do it and you're going to stay the course.
Okay, so an exit would be when it gets so difficult that you don't think you can continue on.
Yeah, either it's not working or it's working, but at a different pace where someone is going to give you a 10x boost. And that's what we wanted with Viki because we were convinced if we can invest in content, this model is working. We had the data. We were getting 3 billion views. We had more translators, fan volunteers than Wikipedia had overall in terms of contributors. So I knew something was working there. But we didn't have the capital to invest in the content. And Netflix was entering at that time into Korean dramas and Hulu and others, which is partly my fault because I introduced Korean dramas to Netflix initially. We were giving it to them with subtitles, but we were making millions out of it. Same with Hulu. And now it became a massive genre. Then they went direct to the producers, and now they're creating things, originals. And had we not exited, it would have been hard.
Can you focus on that for a second?
Sure.
How do you prevent that from happening? Or should you prevent it from happening?
I don't think you can if the company is that large, but I don't mind competition with the sort of the 600-pound gorillas because at the same time it's increasing the size of the pie. So even your slice might get smaller, but it's a much larger pie. So they were market making for us as well. And as Netflix grew, we also grew, right?
Yeah, that's interesting. You talked about the translation, and I didn't realize you had people translating for you. In fact, I thought you might have been using AI.
No, but now actually AI can take it 90% of the way there. But the nuance of fans subtitling let's say an anime is very different than what you would get from professional translators. So people come to Viki because they want the little lingo and the nuance on there. And that last 10%, that last mile is actually is really difficult to get. And that's, I think, where Viki shines. The fans pour their time and energy into the shows they love, the actors they love, the characters they love.
Have you all, so there's so many students here from outside of the US. Have you used Viki? Yeah.
One. Nice.
No, I see
Thank
a
you.
couple heads nodding.
Nice.
And I actually am curious, it's global. So how did you come up with a name that worked?
Well, we had VIIKII. The V stood for video. I don't think we've talked about this. The I stood for people and K stood for 1,000. So you have video and thousands of people. But it was so confusing, people couldn't find it. Where do the I's go? Is it a couple of K's? Is it one I?
Yeah.
So eventually we were able to get VIKI. which was a problem because we got blocked in like 120 countries because it was apparently redirecting to an X-rated site, like the original VIKI. So we almost lost the company because we got a better name, but then we had to, we
It's
survived.
very close to a word that would be sexual in German, that I know. So I'm like,
I remember calling the ISP, like the main telecom provider in Libya, try to convince them that we're actually a startup and not a bad site. Like one by one, the CEO job is just crazy. Like I would fight like one country at a time to be able to get off that list until the company made it.
It's so funny because now when you look it up, they say that Vicky was from Wikipedia. I don't know if you've ever seen that's where it came from.
Wiki from Wikipedia, I've never, but the idea is video and Wikipedia together.
Oh, maybe
So,
that's.
yeah. So it's the combination. So eventually we said video and Wikipedia rather than the eyes. So that's the concept.
You can pivot stories. I like it. Is there a question or just are you adjusting your hair?
See some here on the right.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you've had the benefit of, making very successful startups in a variety of different industries, everything from, infant incubators to language translation platforms. So I guess I'm wondering what you think, the skill sets you've developed are that have allowed you to understand the problems in so many different areas and build competitive and popular products in very different industries.
I built them around areas I always cared about. So even when I did Headline, I had spent time, with the United Nations looking at things on the ground. That also ties to sort of Embrace. But across the board, when I was doing these companies, I always started with data. I think maybe that's a common theme. I like to start with data very, very early rather than just build the product and see if they will come. With Embrace, it was all about data. Like we actually went to Nepal and India, went on the ground. With Vicky, it was the same. Everyone was like, you got to launch a mobile product. What are you doing on the web? And I was like, no, I want to make sure, I want to understand the content arbitrage. If we license everywhere except the home market, it's a fraction of the cost. Like we would get Hollywood shows for $100 per episode. Well, that same show in the US would be $10,000 per episode. But I was able to map it with the data. So I think starting with data early is helpful because it gives you a little bit of a guidance. Then you layer the products on it. And we launched mobile on Viki maybe 18 months after launch. Well, even everyone was saying you got to launch mobile first. As soon as we launched, we went from 0 installs to about 20 million in months because we were ready. The content was there and the product was right and the fit was there. So I didn't stress too much about product market fit early. Everyone talks about product market. You got to be ready for it, right? But yeah, I would say data is one way of doing it. Surrounding yourself with obviously brilliant team. The fastest way I know to $1 billion value is just $1 billion team, really. And oftentimes, actually, in these companies, some of the team members I've continued working with from one company to another.
Yeah, who have you continued to work with? What position? You don't have to say.
Finance, business development, engineering for sure. Actually, engineering probably is the most common.
Interesting. I'm looking around make sure you.
Is that helpful? Or if I answer your question?
It's a good question. You talked about culture, and culture is important to you. Your culture is important to you, and culture in a company is important. And you said don't rush it. Can you talk a little bit about what you've done? You've had 4 huge companies in less than 25 years. What have you done in those companies that is different or the same in terms of the culture that you're trying to inculcate, put into those companies?
I simply didn't force it. I kind of like it bottom up, and you start seeing things. That's why COVID was hard I think for company building for me. Just like I like eye contact, body language, just being around a team, and I think that helps form culture. I never really said this is our culture. I didn't put it on the walls. I didn't have 5 bullet points that this is what we stand for. But it became pretty clear at the end of the day for each of the companies what we're building, what our true north is. And once there is a true north, it was the cultural bridges for Viki, it was saving local news for Headline, it was saving infants with Embrace, right?
Yeah.
So for all those, once we had that, it kind of would guide us, and then the culture will build around it, but not forcing it. or having a handbook on culture, I think was maybe the one common thing. And I wasn't sure if it was a mistake or not, but that was my way of doing it.
It's really easy to have VCs have, give them a bad name. And I don't always think about culture when I'm thinking about a VC. And I'm wondering what you're doing with Messi and how you're looking at it, because I know that's important to you.
We're just starting. We're getting a rhythm. I mean, Leo is completely focused on football, right? And hopefully he gets his 8th Ballon d'Or this month and continues playing all the way through the next World Cup. But this is a little bit different because we're incubating, we're investing, we're building. I think there's going to be a lot of different teams that are working on different projects. So this is the first time where I'm not the founder operator. At a holding level I am, but it's going to be interesting to see, and it's going to be a learning experience for me to have this portfolio companies.
You're based around here.
I'm in SF. I've been in Miami a lot naturally. It's much easier than Barcelona and Paris, but yeah, it's getting closer and closer.
That's fantastic. Anything that surprised you? I mean, it sounds like you were, like, if it's okay to say, a bit of a super fan. Yeah. Anything that, like, when you're meeting people, same with students meeting you, it's kind of intimidating regardless of how humble a person seems. Any thoughts on how to approach someone who you feel like is a little larger than life?
I think you approach with no agenda. I mean, even with the introductions in the Valley, I didn't need really anything from Leo. I didn't need a commission. I didn't need like a favor in return. I honestly wanted to be helpful to help him also build a bridge between sort of football and technology in the Valley. So I think just going openly and honestly as a fan is okay. I mean, when I met him, I was wearing the Barcelona jersey. My kids were wearing the Argentina ones. I think my wife was wearing maybe in like one of the other jerseys, and we just met as fans. But we first met him when he took our kids my kids first met, as I was saying, on the pitch. But slowly, like over dinners, over conversations, it became clear about their curiosity and their, like he wants to use his megaphone for good. So Leo went to Egypt and raised tens of millions for hepatitis C. No one talks about it. And it almost like he went from, I think the maybe 75% of the cases since then have gone down, and it was a massive impact. Then the government instituted a policy where they started giving out for free. What made the news was, they asked Leo the name of the pyramids, right? Rather than, why he was there. But he can do stuff like that, and I think that's why with this holding company, it's a good platform for him to be able to, to do well, but also do good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's kind of a nice place to be for you right now. You talked about, you answered a question about your exit and how that went when you spoke to Rakuten. And I thought you said that you were at a barbecue. And you said you weren't interested. I am kind of curious. As the CEO, you're not the only person who's in charge of the company. You have a team behind you. Did you have any intro conversations with them to let them know you're going to the barbecue? How did that happen?
With the executive team, yes.
Yeah.
But it was a very difficult board. And there was geopolitics, actually. At the time, like we had a big partnership in China. This happens to be a Japanese company with a lot of Korean content. We had a board that included, the BBC, and the board didn't want an exit, but at the same time, one of the board members, which was a strategic company, not to be named, also wanted to buy us on the cheap. So I had to deal with a board, and that was one of the lessons. Give up equity, but control the board if you can, because if the company is going to work out, at the end of the day, you want to be able to kind of steer the ship. But
what does that mean? Give up equity, but control the board. What happens?
Oftentimes, when you're getting term sheets, the VCs will negotiate. They want board seats, they want X% of your company, they want ratchet, sort of liquidity preferences, on and on and on. And oftentimes founders, they don't want to give up much equity. They would give up everything else, including board seats, controls, on and on and on, just they can preserve equity. In my case, I was pretty generous with equity, but I wanted more of sort of the control on the strategy side, and I made a mistake of that at Viki. So I kept it very tight, very small group that some board members were actually surprised we exited. In fact, engineers were surprised. They didn't believe it. What happened, I was in Japan at the time, and Kara Swisher, Wall Street Journal at the time, and I think she was doing all things.
This is my Kara Swisher pose, yes.
Yeah, she's incredible. So she said this deal is very leaky. I
Very
know,
what?
leaky.
Oh.
It's like someone leaked it, I'm gonna publish this. And I was like, you can't, please. I'm in Japan, we're about to sign and my team doesn't know. So I introduced her to Mikitani-san. I said, Miki, maybe you wanna say something. And so she published it. I had to rush to a Starbucks, I remember, send an email to the team and then go to Singapore immediately to talk with the team, and it was dead silence.
How do you even bring it up? You're like, hey, I've
Just
got.
you bring it up openly, and then but over time they knew, it was difficult times, so I had to be open about it. You don't want to surprise the team, even with negative news, and even at board meetings. My style, at least with board meetings, is I have 2 hours with this board. I'm not going to give them an update. I'm going to send the update a week in advance. This is wartime. I want each board member sitting on their laptop, making introductions, firing emails. I use that as sort of working time. So they knew something was happening, but they were surprised they hadn't heard it from me. But a couple days after, things were a bit easier because then they realized what the path is, what the plans is. I just hadn't had time to communicate.
So I think you did something pretty interesting. I think that if you're in a situation where someone's talking to you, you kind of feel like maybe you want to feel them out. And you said, I'm not interested. I didn't actually write it down exactly, but maybe we could talk if there's a 2 in front. And that's a scary thing for people to do, but I've heard, at least when you're negotiating, it's okay to put the number out there. Well, you put it in such a general way, but.
Yeah, I mean, now that I've invested in companies, like through Graph, maybe we've invested in 300 companies, including those I've done directly. I've been on the other side of it. You know the difference between maybe 100 million exit to a 500 million exit? Honestly, if it's still an early company, it's the optics. It's the team, it's how you position it. And I knew that I'd much rather get a term sheet rather than exit, because Yahoo was talking to us, we had Google talking with us, but I was just running out of time. I wasn't paying myself for a long time. I was on, my mother-in-law's credit cards, and that's scary. Don't take money from your mother-in-law. You want to make sure that startup succeeds. Or take money from your mother-in-law because you want it to succeed. But but I also had to feel that confidence because I was a little bit worried that if I wasn't confident in that, and I had to convince myself that that's the right thing to do, that they could feel it's a falling knife. Why is it selling it? And no one wants to catch a falling knife, right?
Is that I haven't heard that expression. Is that an Armenian expression? It's just interesting, a falling knife. I mean,
No.
I get it, but I like that expression.
I could see it being that, no.
Well, I don't know.
I don't know how I learned it or when I learned it. From a VC, I think.
From doing that and having this acquisition, you stayed at Rakuten. But wasn't there an entire campaign about how to pronounce it? Rakuten. Does anybody remember that?
They did. They had a Super Bowl ad.
How do you pronounce
Rakuten.
it? Rakuten.
I stayed and I didn't have to. I don't know if this is disclosed. I mean, again, like I said, we're lucky and blessed. It was an all-cash deal, so we didn't have to stay, but I stayed for 4 years. When typically you exit, you have a 4-year vesting period. But this was my baby. It's to your question earlier, I wasn't going to walk out on my team. And I wanted to continue building it. If I took that much time away from my family, my kids, the opportunity cost is so high that I wanted to also, I had the pride of showing, you know what, this was actually important. I'm going to continue building it, and I'm going to make it even bigger. So I did stay.
I saw that it increased, the reach increased at least 80%. My numbers could be off, but I mean, it was huge.
Yeah. It grew, and it's we went from just Korean dramas to Taiwanese to Japanese, and continues growing. And the whole idea was really global TV, right? That's why it's called Powered by Fans, because of all the subtitles. But Mikitani-san was also fantastic. Honestly, I was initially worried that we're exiting to a big company. He happens to be from an entirely different culture, but as an entrepreneur himself. It's hard to find companies in Japan, and he built Rakuten from scratch. He was at HBS and came back and built it. He understood and gave us the leeway to just build away. It was actually an incredible parent company. Most exits don't work out well.
And after they bought or they acquired, where did you all move then?
We were in Singapore. Every quarter I was in Japan for board
Okay.
meetings, but we were building it out of Singapore. We had offices in Shanghai, Indonesia, Malaysia, San Francisco, kind of where we were.
So I complained to you earlier that it's really hard to do a timeline. Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
I saw that you launched Matchday, like you're the co-founder of it, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So what is the difference between Matchday and Sorar, for example?
And so
Can you say that one? Just
yeah,
for
so Matchday is, I'll say it and I'll answer it at the same time. It's the first company we incubated under Playtime. And actually it started with sort of the Panini stickers idea, right? It was, how do you build a video game, like a football, like a manager game or FIFA Ultimate Team if you play with it, where you can keep owning the assets. So this was the time where digital collectibles were growing, and we realized, okay, if we have player rights, like all these players from game to game, year to year, you don't lose them. If you play the FIFA games, every year there's a new release, and everything that you've earned, you lose. So compared to Sorare, which is a fantasy game, actually like tied to real game stats, this one is more of a video game. I would compare it more to FIFA Ultimate Team. And it hasn't launched yet, so keep an eye out for it. You play Sorare? Yeah, it's incredible.
Like, can you win money on the game or not? No, you cannot win money. You can only win cards, right?
Yeah,
On Matchday,
you,
yeah.
you earn it, you trade it, you can buy it, but you cannot earn it.
Okay. You can sell the cards?
You can in the marketplace, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that okay to do?
Yeah.
Okay, just
Yeah,
curious.
Yeah. I mean, they went on after we funded it and we started it. It was, it happened to be Derek Coe is the CEO, was our first engineer at Viki, and now he's the CEO. So that's like, again, one of the
Yeah.
people I always wanted to work with.
Yeah.
And with Sebastian de Halou, I invest with at Graph Ventures, he's the head of gaming. So it's people I worked with
After
in
a
the
while,
past.
you do kind of collect in a
It's
well,
hard to find good people, right? So if you find good people early in life, just stay close. It's really hard to find good people when you're building.
When you started Hoodline, which is also totally fascinating, and you had not founded Hoodline when we talked last. Rosmic was here a number of years ago. We're trying to figure out when it was, but it was quite a bit before the pandemic. But Hoodline was then bought by Nextdoor.
Right.
And then you said Nextdoor went public, I don't know, 8 months later or a year later.
Yeah. Reverse merger with Khosla.
Did you stay with Nextdoor at all? Which, by the way, also has a couple of Berkeley grad founders.
Yeah. It's also a great story and a great team. I love their vision and their mission. It was very, very hyper local at a community level. But again, local is hard. That exit was a little bit different than Rakuten. It was sort of our engineering team and our platform. But the majority of the content you still see today that on Nextdoor that's generated by AI. It's actually it's the models that we built and the engines we built. So that exit was a business development partnership. We couldn't raise the next round, and we like to compete in local and do it right. I needed to raise a very large amount, probably 25 to 50 million, and launch nearby.com. But Sarah Fryer, who's a CEO, and before that she was a CFO at Square. I think she went to, she went to Stanford, right? I don't know if she had Berkeley ties. She's brilliant. So
Ryan has Berkeley ties, but I don't remember about
yeah,
Sarah.
I think she has a Stanford GSP. So when we met up, we started talking about the vision. It was clear, like it's really difficult for us to be the data source and a platform and build that kind of a team and go be the destination at the same time. You have to pick. It's really hard to be both. So they had the destination, we had the technology. And this one we did pretty much on all equity. Unlike Rakuten, this time around I was like, oh, this stock is going to go great. And let me pay back the investors and do it on equity. In 10 years it might, but
I know. It
I
still
still
might.
love the product and the company.
Oh, that's
So
interesting.
I stayed, I think, maybe a little under a year, and pandemic had hit. I wanted to go back, spend time with my mom in Cairo, and so I transitioned out, and the Playtime idea was what came out of it.
Interesting. Interesting. You have a question over here.
Thanks for describing a lot of your work. I Embrace is seen as sort of like one of the shining beacons of design for extreme affordability. I went through the course, and it's sort of one of the first things we get introduced is look at this success. It's also one of the few technologies out of the course that's actually been
that's
commercialized.
Great. Embrace? I didn't know. Nice.
Yeah, Stuart Colson has good things to say about it. In your 9 years serving as co-founder and board member, what were some of the biggest challenges of scaling a technology within sort of marginalized communities? And what was sort of the decision as well to simultaneously serve as a board member and at some point also start building out Viki?
Yeah, good questions. I'll go from like in the order you asked them. I mean, there were challenges. Like we were a team that didn't know each other. We were coming from different walks of life. I remember one time we were gonna just dissolve the company. We're like, okay, this was a good project. We got an A on it. We're kind of we're moving on. We're gonna do different things. And I got the group together. We climbed a tree by the Stanford cafeteria. We didn't come down until we resolved our differences. I think we were literally sitting in the tree for 3 hours. So when you ask about culture building, so I was like, we're here, there's a tree, let's go up and talk. And at the time, there was a famous, actually there still is, at the GSP at Stanford, there's a class called Touchy-Feely, where there's no agenda. Like literally there's zero agenda. And just the amount of self-disclosure that happens. So I tried that method there. But the team that wanted to lead it, Jane and Rahul knew that they needed to be in India, and Jane wanted to lead it. I think I was the initial CEO, and I was like, that's fantastic. You know, you just always, if there's someone that wants to take charge, and clearly they're capable, they just ran with it. At that point, I needed to be in LA. My wife and I met in high school as exchange students, so we always been moving for each other. She picked Singapore, I picked SF, so it was my turn, but I had to be in LA at the time. That's where she was, and I couldn't be in India, and we had our first child. But I stayed on the board because board members are typically the co-founders you can't have. I mean, that's how I would think about startups too. Like when I think about building my board, it's the people I know that, you know, they've had their exits or they wouldn't want to come and start. So I was like, oh, who are the people that I would love to build something with? Let me go get them on the board. So I felt like a co-founder on the board, and I was able to support from there. And I still do. I mean, Jane and I were talking this morning to see what we can do for this unique region of Armenia. Yep.
Did you get?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Thanks. No, that's good. Thanks for reminding me. You know, the last mile was always a challenge because you need to find a village elder, or you need to find sort of like health centers, not the hospitals, because the hospitals have like their own systems or incubators. But oftentimes, like parents are hours away from the nearest hospital. So even though we had it in the country, like being able to have the last mile to delivery was always the challenge. And every country we went to, and I think we're in 22 countries, that was always the issue. So identifying the right NGOs or helping launch actually NGOs to be able to get them to the folks that need it has always been the challenge and continues to be. I think oftentimes it's the same with drugs like malaria and for HIV vaccine, like getting it to the last mile always is a challenge. So that's a problem to solve. The last mile of healthcare actually in villages. It's been 15 years, it's still the same problem.
An opportunity. There's a question over here, I think, yeah.
Yeah, so as a non-technical person, how do you go about finding a brilliant technical team?
How do I find what as a non-technical person?
How do you go about finding a brilliant technical team?
So at Stanford, I tried my best to at least get a little basic level of credibility on the technical side. So I did a certificate in, I think it was called Certificate of Mechanical Engineering and Design. So I was going to teach myself coding, and I was like, I'm going to be a horrible coder. It's going to take me so much time. You just got to know your blind spots, but you also got to know your superpowers. And with engineers, the conversations were always honest. Like I gave them complete leeway to run with things and make decisions because I knew I can't micromanage them. And you have to hire like really strong engineering managers. So that was where I would always start. If you hire at like, like the A players, they're going to go hire A players. If you start hiring B players, then, it goes to C. It's really hard for a B manager to hire an A player. So I started with really strong engineering managers, and that was hard. With Hoodline, that was hard.
Yeah.
It took 8 months to get our head of data science, who happens to be a Berkeley grad, and I think she's still here. And when she came on board, the way she ran interviews and the way people gravitated towards her with her credibility, it was just incredible. Like all of a sudden, we hired like another 5 engineers, and I was struggling with it.
What did she do when she was running interviews? I'm always kind of interested in how you interview.
Real life stuff. Like we would give data sets. And just like if they were to, how would they play around with this data set to answer a hyperlocal question? Yeah. Sometimes we would, like IBM's Watson model does really good sentiment analysis. That was, at the time, 60 or 70% accurate.
Yeah.
That would tell you this news article is positive sentiment, neutral, negative. And she's the one who built the model that got it to 84%. Wow. And this was a headline, right? So she would actually work with things that she worked on, and it was challenging, and the best engineers, again, wanted those challenges. So open conversations, don't micromanage, let them lead, but also get their buy-in, because engineers don't want to just sit there and code. They want to solve real problems. So I would include them in the management decisions.
Have you been a technical founder as well, or do you not need it?
I never went out to look really. Like honestly, each of the startups, and it's funny you mentioned there were no gaps in between. I think I just have one speed, which is part of the problem. I just go. We started Match Day and Playtime because Derek, who's a technical co-founder, was ready to jump in. He had just sold his company Spin, the Spin scooters. He was a co-founder of it, and he was our first engineer at Viki. When I decided to do it, I was like, okay, we're building this. So it naturally came together. Viki was my classmate at GSP. With Hoodline, Marcos had just moved here from Brazil, and one of my classmates has introduced us. We talked about the idea of hyperlocal, and over the weekend, he built a prototype. I was like, okay, this guy is incredible. It's like, Marcos, we're going to fund this thing. So I took it to Greylock, and I think it's like a couple of the early VCs that came in. As soon as we raised capital, it's like, okay, I'm staying, and we built. So it happens very organically. It's really hard to actually go and interview to find a technical co-founder. It has to be a good fit. Is that helpful?
You didn't talk that much about your time at Cal. Can you talk a little bit about what you would tell your Cal self that you know now, looking back, or some impactful things for you at Cal that we can share with all these Cal students?
Honestly, I wish I did more. I was just, I was alone in the country without parents, and I realized that if you don't get a 3.8 GPA, you're not going to get that McKinsey job, and I was just so. And I had a lot of that. So I wish I joined more clubs. Honestly, I wish I had more dinners, small dinners, get to know friends, like my closest friend. And I don't mean to turn this sad. Eric Blumel was a PIS with me. He's brilliant. He went and studied in Chile, then went to NYU for law school. And he became one of the youngest professors. He was bike riding back, and he was 31. He passed away. So if you go under the Campanelli, there's a very small tree that's growing, and that's where our department is. And I planted that tree, and that's the only for Eric, and it's by that department. So whenever I'm on campus, I go pour a beer or walk by it. But it gives you kind of those kind of relationships, and Berkeley means a lot to me at a personal level. And it was my formative years. After Berkeley, I got my first job. When I was at Berkeley, I was working at Jimmy Bean's, the coffee shop, and making lattes to business school students, thinking one day I'm also going to get an MBA. And when I realized in management consulting I can get paid $44,000, I just couldn't believe it. I was like, okay, I'm taking this job.
That used to be a lot of money.
Yeah, I know. But for someone who was just making a couple of $100s a month, it was a big deal.
I have this feeling that a lot of students actually want to talk to you maybe one-on-one, and we usually have a line, and I don't want to keep too long.
That's fine.
Today, we always have people giving feedback, and so we have a code that we put up, and I'll do that in just a second. But today we've done something special, maybe in honor of Vicky and video. We've asked students to also take pictures. So if you think you're being photographed a
that's
lot,
fine.
or students are photographing, they are. I just want to thank you for your honesty, your enthusiasm, and also the fun of talking about Leo Messi. So we'll
great.
put that up. Thank you very much,
Thank you,
everyone.
thank you.